Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and 10.1.5 has been out now for some time. We've had a bunch of nerfs come through, and I wanted to lock in a tier list at this point in time to start identifying which specializations are the top performers, which are the ones that you really got to keep your eyes on, maybe re-roll to or pick up on your teams moving forward. This tier list is going to be valuable to you because it's going to help you get a lot of rating if you're making the right decision on the most powerful specializations. And if you want to make sure you're staying up to date with everything related to World of Warcraft and not falling behind the competition and not missing out, then smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So let's get started here. We've got Affliction Warlock. Now, Affliction Warlock is having a really tough time in this Paladin meta. Paladins absolutely demolish them. I would say a lot of healers, even things like Holy Priest, can demolish them with Fade Dispel, and now we've got Double Dispel and things like that. For me, Affliction's probably coming in at like a B+. Now, in solo shuffle, it's a lot better than this. I would say A+, but I'm taking into account threes and solo shuffle, so it'd probably be maybe A tier in solo shuffle, but I'm putting it in B+ for the overall bracket. I think that it has a lot of hard counters. It can be a bit more of a struggle now, especially because Death Knights are more relevant. Arcane Mage, this is another one. I'm kind of leaning more to the B+ tier. I feel like it's got these niche counter situations where you feel like an absolute god, but then other ones where you can't really keep up with other casters and caster mirrors, and you have a tough time in that regard. So it's kind of hit or miss, but definitely you can make it work. Like if you're trying your best on these specs, you can make them work, but it's going to take a lot more work than the ones that are above it. Arms Warrior, this one might come as a bit of surprise to a lot of people, but I'm actually putting Arms Warrior in the B+. I've been seeing Arms Warriors losing a heck of a lot, whether it be in solo shuffle or whether it be in ranked threes. It seems like Arms Warriors having a really tough time keeping up with a lot of the spellcasters, getting their pressure out. The melee cleaves that they're in get hard countered by a lot of the double spell cleaves. I think Arms Warrior is not exactly in the strongest position, so if you're struggling on it, this is likely why. Assassination Rogue, I think this is coming below the cut here. Deathmark is just not as threatening as it was previously, and your damage is pretty low. Like, you're doing less damage than a Salty Rogue. You don't bring any of the burst or any of the control, so really suffering at the moment if you're an Assassination Rogue. Augmentation Evoker, this is a god spec. This class is absolutely bonkers. If you get mastered at this, you will never lose a solo shuffle lobby. You probably never lose a ranked threes game. It's functioning like a super souped up prop paladin, really, with how it empowers its allies and redirects damage with blistering scales, and is able to dispel its allies with dream projection. It's a really powerful spec. It's definitely on the god tier. Beast Mastery Hunter. Honestly, Beast Mastery Hunter I see falling off a little bit. It's not overly spectacular. I'd say maybe A tier over the rest of the DPS here that are in the B+. It's easier to get its damage off. It's not as hard countered as these. It can deal with a lot of the spellcasters with dots, with Feign Death, and still kind of pressure people down and win with dampening. So I think it is probably better than the B+ tier, but edging down a little bit now. It's still going to have the difficulties of its own survivability. Demonology Warlock. This is one that I think is probably A tier, not necessarily A+ or S. Mostly because Death Knights are making it tough for you to be running around a lot, and these tank augmentation evokers as well, I think, can out dampen you and drag fights on for some time and make it difficult for you. It's still really solid because it's got a ton of crowd control, diminishing returns, and still is doing really good damage, but maybe slightly shorter coming than what I had predicted originally. Destruction Warlock, similarly, I think it's probably coming in at the A tier. Just really good damage overall. Going to be getting its damage out easier than these classes. It's going to be more synergized with a lot of other classes, but not falling into like the category of the best possible options. Just a pretty solid all-around one. Again, ideally, you'd want all the classes to end up in like an A tier situation, I think, if you had a perfectly balanced game. Devastation Evoker, this one I'm putting in B tier. I think that Devastation Evoker still, if you're good at it, you're going to get a lot of damage out, but it's hit or miss whether or not you're countered, depending on the lobby that you get. And if you get these Augmentation Evokers, they're just like a better version of your class. It's going to be tough to get kills. You're going to get outpaced and get out dampened, and finishing matches can be a trouble, and you're still kind of a coin flip class, whether or not you one-shot somebody or not. Discipline Priest is honestly a bit of a struggle. I feel like you run out of mana faster than a lot of other healers. It can be tough to get your atonement healing up and actually get damage out going with your rotation without everybody kind of falling over. I think that Disc Priest is kind of maybe falling off a little bit. While if you're a spectacular player, I think you can make it work. I think you will struggle more than other healers currently. Elemental Shaman, I'm throwing this into the A+. I think that Elemental Shamans are doing a monstrous amount of damage, just insane overall damage, just really able to carry games, especially in the Wizard lobbies right now because they do really well in that environment. They're just doing so much damage. Enhancement Shaman, this one might come as a bit of a surprise. With the Doomwinds build, it's either a B+ or an A. and I want to say A. I'm leaning more towards A. I think that with Doom Winds and the damage that you can do in burst windows, the Sentence procs absolutely sends you over the top, and your support and off healing is still great and phenomenal. Similarly with Elemental Shaman. Feral Druid, this is a spec that I think is slept on. I think it's probably also A tier and above B+. I think it's really well rounded. I think a lot of Feral Druids are realizing that they can Cyclone just as much as Boomkins can, especially if you're running High Winds down Feral Druid, and you can keep getting really good control of games. Honestly, a really underrated spec. It's really strong right now. Fire Mage, really squishy, a lot of firepower. Those are the main problems with it for me. I think it is better than Arcane overall, but it's kind of like Affliction with the sense that it's just kind of doing damage, kind of sitting back, trying to just keep pressure going. But in those situations, I think that it can. But its defense, obviously, is what's holding it back from getting into the S or the God tier. Frost DK might be close to the worst spec, maybe the worst spec currently in the game. The changes have not hit the place for Frost Athlete like they have for Unholy. You're just not good anymore. Your burst damage is lower, and the sustain has not felt noticeable for it. So Frost DK, unfortunately, kind of lost and forgotten here towards the bottom. Frost Mage, I actually think is A tier along with Fire Mage. I think Ray of Frost, Glacial Spike, this build is really powerful. Alter Time is a really good defensive cooldown, especially when there's no purges in a match. You're going to feel really tanky in that regard, and you can kite melees around. And honestly do pretty well even into Spell Cleave mirrors. I think it's really underrated. It looks like a lot of fun. I actually want to pick up a Frost Mage myself. Fury Warrior, this one again might come as a bit of a surprise, but I'm actually putting it into the B+ tier. I think that warriors in general are having a tough time moving around with all of the casters up in the scene, and they're a lot squishier than a lot of other classes, this might be like a really surprising ranking to a lot of people because a lot of people put warriors up towards the top, but I honestly think that they're falling off. Holy Paladin, I think Holy Paladin is still probably S tier, even after the changes to it. If you're playing around your mana talents, I think that you can still maintain your mana for quite some time, but you're probably not in the god status that you were previously. Holy Priest, I think Holy Priest is probably an A+ healer. It's got a lot more throughput than Disc, can do comparable damage, has a lot better defensives, has a really good time with the double dispel talent and fade dispelling dots, especially with all the wizards. I think it's a really good pickup, especially with range crowd control like Chastise. Demon Hunter, I think this is probably coming in a little bit more average, probably around the A tier, a bit better than these DPS. His damage overall is just much higher. It's also a class that synergizes really effectively with Augmentation Evoker, maybe one of the best. As far as melee are concerned, you can do a lot of damage, a lot of crowd control, really versatile class. Marksmanship Hunter, again, this is a spec you can make work, but I'm kind of throwing it down here. It's kind of a cheesy one-shot. Teams that know how to play around you and line of sight you will not be able to accomplish too much, but teams that don't, you will absolutely rock them and own them. So it's a really good noob stomper, but as far as like overall high-level competition, it's going to be more of a struggle. Balanced Druid. Now, right now, I'm going to say Balanced Druid is God tier. This is mostly due to the High Winds on her talent. When you cycle on someone for 6 seconds, they come out of it and they do 30% less damage and healing for 6 seconds. So they're basically cycling for 12 seconds every time you do it. And that is the main reason. Defensively, they can still kind of be taken down, but Bear Form is definitely a good failsafe to try and recover. But the main contribution to God status is going to be the High Winds PvP talent. So if you're not playing that, you better make sure that you are. Mistweaver Monk. This one, I see some healers saying it's terrible and it's not good at all. I think that depends on the matchups. If they're playing Augmentation Mirrors, I think Fist Weaving is really good with Augmentation Evoker, honestly. And in Wizard lobbies, when you can sit back and just kind of AFK heal and not really focus on getting crowd control or getting crowd controlled by enemies, it's great, especially if there's no subtlety rogues. I think it's a great healer, so I don't think that it's as terrible as some people are making it out to be, especially with some of the matchups that it can get. Outlaw Rogue, I think Outlaw Rogue may actually be, in fact, the worst spec in the game. I've seen some rogues trying to say it's better than Subtlety, and I don't know if that is just some propaganda or what is going on with that, but then I watched some Outlaw Rogue gameplay today for the first time, and there's no way. You can't keep up with the Shadow Priest defense, can't keep up with the Boomkin defense. There's no way. I don't think Outlaw Rogue is going to be as strong. I would debate it's probably the worst spec in the game. Preservation Evoker. We got another Preservation Evoker healer. I'm putting it up into A+. Main reason I think it could have some problems is mana. I think if any of the games come down to mana, and if Augmentation Mirrors with the way that it's tuned currently, it could have problems in that regard, but it's still doing the highest damage of any healer and really adds a lot of pressure to the board. So things like Double Dragon, definitely an option. Resto Druid, I've been playing a little bit of it. It doesn't feel terrible anymore. It's all right. I would say it's somewhere maybe with Mistweaver or A+. This is a really tough one, honestly, to rank. Probably better than Mistweaver or close to it. here under the A tier, but the healer balance is getting a lot closer. Retribution Paladin, this is one that draws a lot of controversy no matter what you do with it. I think Rep Paladin is honestly really good. It does a lot of damage. If you learn the ranged matchups, the double ranged matchups, I think you can do really well in those lobbies still. It's the most represented spec and the highest rating of the ladder in the top 5,000. It would be tough to not say that it's not good. So I'm kind of lumping it in here into the A tier for now. I think that's a really good pickup. Resto Shaman probably coming in the A plus, similarly to the other healers, somewhere in and around this ballpark. I think these 4 are kind of carrying at the moment, and the other 3 are trying to keep up with them. Shadow Priest, this is God tier. You are just unkillable, bulletproof class, tons of amazing utility, really fast cast. The changes to their honor talent to, I think it's Mind Trauma, where you suck the haste out of your opponents, is just giving you just the most ridiculous amount of haste that you're just doing so much damage. Nobody can keep up with you. Subtlety Rogue, I think you're probably still S tier. Even in the augmentation evoker meta, I think the one-shot isolation thing and being just unkillable is still a really good quality to have onto the subtlety rogue, but maybe not god status with these other casters potentially outdoing you, but we'll kind of have to wait and see, because I think subtlety rogue is kind of a sleeper powerful spec. Survival hunter, in jungle cleave, gonna feel really good. Not super versatile as far as your comps though, probably gonna feel like more like in this tier. B plus at the moment. It's going to be tough to keep up. And again, you're just really limited on comps. But if you're a skilled player, I think you could make it work. Unholy Death Knights, I don't know if I want to put this on S or God. I don't want to say... It's hit or miss. I see some Death Knights that have figured out how to play, and they're doing like 80k DPS, and it feels like a God class. And then there's other ones where they're just not doing anything, and it's really tough to say whether or not it's that great. For now, I'm going to put it in God class, and it'll probably be the only melee DPS currently in God class. And I'm leaning like maybe it should slide down to S at the moment. Windwalker with their defensive buffs, absolute monsters. Absolute monsters. Going to be eating people up. I think that it's S tier. I think it's a really strong specialization now with its bolstered defense, great utility, tons of pressure they can put up and keep up with a lot of the other wizards in the current wizard mirror. Has tons of tools to redirect and deal with their damage. I think it's a really good pick right now. So the most surprising things from this tier list, I think, upon first glance, is like warriors coming in a lot lower. I'd say they're somewhere between B plus and A, and maybe it's because of the more increasing prevalence of frost mage that warrior specs I think are starting to suffer more. And there's a lot of double casters with boomkin where like turbo or ret warrior feels like completely unwinnable, and unfortunately things like TSG not necessarily the best comp in the game. Same thing with Shadow Priest warrior or moonkin warrior. They're all right, but I wouldn't say that they're the absolute best. Probably leaning more towards turbo. It does seem weird to put observing this, to put enhancement shaman above warrior and not on the same tier as warrior. Would be the only thing here. I'm wondering if I want to slide anything around. The A and the B plus is really tough as far as trying to like slide them apart from each other, because is Destro really comparable? I think it's probably comparable. Maybe we need to move the range DPS all together kind of in an order where I feel like they're going to be more represented. So from left to right, like we get the highest ranked melee to the lowest ranked melee in that sense. Okay, so what do we got here? What are we looking here? Probably Arcane is better than Affliction, I think. Devastation is probably better than MM. Frost Outlaw. All right, we got this all on lock. All right, we're ready to lock it in. This is it. We got the God tier, we got the S tier, A plus, A, B plus, B, and C. These guys definitely suffering, and these guys just really niche options are just really underperforming with this one. These ones you can make it work, but I think you will notice a bit more of a struggle on these classes. These ones are just really solid at the moment. These ones are amazing. These ones are Omega amazing. These ones are obvious God status. Other than that, I hope that you enjoyed the tier list here. Hope it's got some information to you as far as what the current meta is for you. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I will see you in the next one.